forward.
The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful, but nothing, truly nothing, has prepared me to address those elected members of our government who continue to deny the events of that day, and in doing so, betray their oath of office.
Powerful testimony from Capitol Police Officer Michael Fanone criticizing members of Congress. The excruciating testimony today, 4 police officers reliving that date, January 6th, when they had to fight for their lives. Today, pushing back in Congress against attempts to rewrite the insurrection and the powerful closing statement.
Why is telling the truth hard? I guess in this America, it is.
The new mask guidance, the CDC reversing course, now saying fully vaccinated people should wear masks indoors in COVID hotspots as cases are climbing tonight in 49 states. What you need to know tonight about the new guidance. And overseas, Asia's new COVID epicenter in Indonesia, the all too familiar images, hospitals overrun, and the grave simply cannot be dug fast enough.
I go to sleep with the sound of the siren outside my window every night. And every morning, 5 or 6 a.m., I wake up because of the same sound.
And the growing number of cases throughout the region. Olympic great Simone Biles withdrawing from the team gymnastics event at the Olympics. Team USA finishing with a silver behind Russia. The star gymnast says it was a mental health decision. Our James Longman joins us from Tokyo. And tonight, the famous Wu-Tang Clan album, once bought for nearly $2 million by Pharma bro Martin Shkreli, sold by the U.S. government. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. Raw and intense emotion today at that hearing on Capitol Hill as we heard from officers in their own words describe what happened on January 6th from their vantage point. We're standing by to talk with a Democrat on the Select Committee and also a Republican. But first, we begin with that sudden CDC reversal on masking and its urgent health alert to doctors tonight. Today, the government recommended vaccinated people wear masks indoors where the virus is more widespread. The CDC pointing to worrisome new data that shows vaccinated people infected with the highly contagious Delta variant may be contagious and spread the virus to others. And late today, the CDC releasing a memo to doctors and nurses urging them to increase vaccinations to prevent surges in new infections that could overwhelm healthcare capacity. Also tonight, ABC News has confirmed President Biden plans to announce a vaccine mandate for the federal government's more than 2 million workers tomorrow. The message tonight from the president and his team unambiguously clear: get vaccinated and as soon as possible. Eva Pilgrim leads us off tonight.
Tonight, with new evidence, fully vaccinated people with so-called breakthrough cases can potentially spread the Delta variant, the CDC reversing mask guidance for schools and millions of vaccinated Americans.
In rare occasions, some vaccinated people infected with the Delta variant after vaccination may be contagious and spread the virus to others. This new science is worrisome.
That spread from vaccinated people not seen before with earlier strains, which is one reason the CDC is now urging Americans to wear masks indoors if they are in an area with substantial or high transmission, not only to protect yourself, but to protect others now that the CDC has this new data that even vaccinated people can transmit the virus. The CDC also reversing its guidance from 2 weeks ago, now recommending a universal masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors, regardless of vaccination status. The CDC stressing the vast majority of transmission occurs among unvaccinated people, but they are studying clusters of breakthrough infections.
When we examine the rarer breakthrough infections and we look at the amount of virus in those people, it is pretty similar to the amount of virus in unvaccinated people.
Late today, President Biden saying a requirement for federal employees to get a vaccine is under consideration.
We have a pandemic because of the unvaccinated. There's showing enormous confusion. The more we learn about this virus and the Delta variant, the the more we have to be worried and concerned. And only one thing we know for sure, if those other 100 million people got vaccinated, we'd be in a very different world. Get vaccinated if you haven't, and I'm really as smart as I said you are.
The president also saying in a statement, we are not going back to last year. More vaccinations and mask wearing in the areas most impacted by the Delta variant will enable us to avoid the kind of lockdowns, shutdowns, school closures, and disruptions we faced in 2020. Unlike 2020, we have both the scientific knowledge and the tools to prevent the spread of this disease. We are not going back to that. Today's new mask guidance coming as parents across the country are protesting mask mandates in schools.
I cannot stand to see her masked, and she doesn't want to be masked.
7 states have banned mask mandates in schools, including Arizona, where students are already back in the classroom. Masks optional. And with the Delta surge, a warning from the former head of the CDC, Dr. Tom Frieden, that COVID cases could soar.
We're heading into a rough time. It's likely, if our trajectory is similar to that in the United Kingdom, that we could see as many as 200,000 cases a day.
In Houston, doctors are seeing a repeat of moments like this from last summer's surge.
In the last 14 days, we've had a 500% increase in the number of admissions.
And in Florida, hospitals overwhelmed. Some doctors pleading for extra staffing. In Fort Lauderdale, the family of 15-year-old Paulina Velasquez says she was planning to get the vaccine when she got COVID. She's now fighting for her life on a ventilator. Paulina's vaccinated mother is experiencing a breakthrough COVID infection herself, not leaving her daughter's side.
It was terrifying for me because I said, why me? Why not, why my daughter? Why not me? It was very sad.
So many scary moments like that still playing out across the country. Eva Pilgrim joins us now. And Eva, both President Biden and also the CDC Director Rochelle Walensky stressing today that this moment that we're in could have been avoided.
That's right. And Walensky adding to that, Lindsay, saying that without more people willing to get vaccinated, the big concern next is the next variant that may emerge just a few mutations away could potentially evade our vaccines. Lindsay.
And Eva, we're also learning some disturbing details about alleged threats to Dr. Fauci. Tonight, officials have made an arrest. Tell us about that.
That's right. They have arrested a Maryland man for sending several disturbing emails threatening Dr. Fauci over about an 8-month span, not only threatening Dr. Fauci, but also threatening members of his family. It was part of the reason that we heard Dr. Fauci was given protection. Lindsay.
Eva Pilgrim, thank you so much. And as Eva reports, some public health officials have been vilified, even threatened. But let's bring down the temperature a bit and talk about the science that could save lives. Let's welcome our friend, Dr. Richard Besser, former acting director of the CDC and CEO of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us, Dr. B.
It's good to be here, Lindsay.
So we're learning that the viral load from the Delta variant could be the same between vaccinated and unvaccinated people. How concerning is that?
Well, it's very concerning, and it's a good sign that CDC is responding very quickly with new guidance on this, because what it means is that we have to double down our efforts on getting people vaccinated. That's what's going to slow this thing down. The Delta variant is so much more contagious. It leads to so much more virus being in people's bodies and being able to transmit, that it's absolutely critical that we get more of the population vaccinated.
With the community spread happening across the country, are you afraid that the Delta variant could mutate again?
Well, the more the virus transmits, whether it's the Delta variant or other variants around the world, the more opportunity there is for a strain to develop that our vaccines aren't effective against. We should be extremely grateful that the vaccines that are out there now are very effective, not just against the strain that we had before, but against the Delta variant. They're very effective at preventing severe illness, hospitalization, and death, and that's what we really really care about. But as long as this is transmitting widely here in the United States and around the globe, there's the opportunity for a new strain to come that we're not going to be so fortunate for.
The updated mask guidance that we just received was clearly a major reversal from what they said just 2 months ago. Speaking as someone who used to run the CDC, how hard is it to change course like this? Do you risk losing public trust?
Well, you know, I hope it does the exact opposite. CDC just within the past several days received data to show that people who are fully vaccinated may be able to transmit this virus to other people, and they've acted on that. This data came out of outbreak investigations that they're conducting. That to me is a good sign. We're in a very fluid situation. You know, there are many who wanted to declare victory over this pandemic several months ago, but it's far from over. You know, we are in the summer, which last year we saw allowed us to have some little reprieve, but with a new variant that's spreading across the country, cases going up across the country, and vaccination rates being very flat, that's a real cause for concern. What gives me a little hope in this is that we've been very effective at vaccinating elderly people, and so we're not going to see the same incredible toll in terms of death. But right now, we're losing more than 200 people a day, and most of those deaths are preventable. So we do need to do more.
And what do you think about the timing? Do you agree with that? How does this change as far as the dynamic of students going back to school?
Well, I think that we have all of the tools we need to get kids back to school safely. I think individual school districts are going to have to decide whether they require teachers and staff to be vaccinated. That would help. We know that now the CDC is recommending that all people indoors at schools wear masks. That's important. Approaching ventilation, improving ventilation, that's important. But taking a layered approach, we can get kids back into schools learning safely. And that gives me a lot of comfort as a pediatrician and a parent. Kids belong in school this fall learning, not at home looking at a camera.
And lastly, Dr. B, just break this down for us. What's the simplest way for us to get control of this virus inside of this country right now?
I mean, the simplest way, Lindsay, is get vaccinated. And when you do, look for your friends, your family members who have concerns, and listen to them. Give them some space, some room to be able to change their mind. Because if we can do that, if we can treat each other with respect and get the vaccination numbers up, we will see the end of this pandemic. But until that time, we are all at risk.
Dr. Richard Besser, always a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Lindsay.
And now to the emotional moments on Capitol Hill today and the gripping, gut-wrenching testimony from 4 officers who held the line on January 6th. The roughly 3-hour hearing was the first from the Select Committee in the House of Representatives charged by Speaker Pelosi to investigate the attack on the Capitol. The 2 Republicans on the committee blasted their colleagues, Representative Adam Kinzinger saying at the hearing, "We don't blame victims, we go after the criminals." The committee is determined to get to the root of the problem, including what happened at the White House on that day. Rachel Scott reports in from Capitol Hill.
Do you swear?
Tonight, 4 uniformed police officers, in their own words, testifying before Congress, telling Americans what they went through on January 6th.
I remember thinking there was a very good chance I would be torn apart or shot to death with my own weapon.
Their harrowing account came with new and raw video. The violent mob of Trump supporters surging into the Capitol. This officer refusing to give ground, even as one man punches the glass behind him.
Can I speak to Pelosi? Yeah, we're coming. Oh, my kids, we're coming for you too.
Sergeant Aquilino Ganell, who also served in Iraq, first to testify.
On January 6th, for the first time, I was more afraid to work at the Capitol than my entire deployment to Iraq.
Sergeant Ganell said he thought he was going to die.
Back up, no, stop.
Crushed by the mob, sprayed by chemicals.
I arrived home at nearly 4 a.m. on January 7th. I had to push my wife away from me because she wanted to hug me. And I told her no, because of all the chemical that my uniform had on. Sorry.
Then Officer Michael Fanone.
I was dragged from the line of officers and into the crowd. I heard someone scream, "I got one." As I was swarmed by a violent mob, they ripped off my badge. They grabbed and stripped me of my radio. They seized ammunition that was secured to my body. They began to beat me with their fists and with what felt like hard metal objects. I heard chanting from some in the crowd, "Get his gun," and kill him with his own gun. I thought of my 4 daughters who might lose their dad. I said as loud as I could manage, "I've got kids."
His body camera capturing that moment.
What makes the struggle harder and more painful is to know so many of my fellow citizens, including so many of the people I put my life at risk to defend, are downplaying or outright denying what happened. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
Officer Daniel Hodges.
There were a significant number of men dressed in tactical gear attending the gathering, wearing ballistic vests, helmets, goggles, military face masks.
What happened to Officer Hodges in the Capitol recorded on video for the world to see. And even today, clearly painful for him to watch. Crushed in a doorway by men he calls terrorists.
Directly in front of me, a man seized the opportunity of my vulnerability, grabbed the front of my gas mask, and used it to beat my head against the door. He switched to pulling it off my head, the strap stretching against my skull and straining my neck.
Finally, Officer Harry Dunn, a 13-year veteran of the Capitol Police, describing a face-off with the racist mob.
I told them to just leave the Capitol, and in response they yelled, "No, man, this is our house. President Trump invited us here. We're here to stop the steal. Joe Biden is not the president. Nobody voted for Joe Biden." I'm a law enforcement officer, and I do my best to keep politics out of my job. But in this circumstance, I responded, "Well, I voted for Joe Biden. Does my vote not count? Am I nobody?" That prompted a torrent of racial epithets. One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo!" No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer.
Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney then asking about former President Donald Trump's words revealed in recent days, how he describes the crowd on January 6th.
You hear former President Trump say, quote, "It was a loving crowd. There was a lot of love in the crowd." How does that make you feel?
It's upsetting. It's a pathetic excuse for his behavior, for something that he himself helped to create, this monstrosity.
Those officers seemingly not holding back. Rachel Scott joins us now from Capitol Hill. Rachel, Republican Liz Cheney making it very clear today that she wants a detailed account of what happened inside the White House that day.
Yeah, and Cheney says that subpoenas are in fact coming. And I talked to Congressman Adam Schiff. He told me that no one will be off limits. That includes former President Donald Trump and Republican leader Kevin McCarthy. And we've also learned that the Justice Department will allow former DOJ officials to testify, Lindsay.
Very interesting how this will all unfold. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. Joining us now is a member of that select committee from today, Virginia Democratic Congresswoman Elaine Luria. We thank you so much for your time tonight, Congresswoman. Of course, we've just heard much of that heartbreaking testimony from the 4 officers today. What was it like being in the room with them as they had to relive that incredibly challenging and traumatizing day?
Well, Lindsay, it was It was incredibly difficult. You could feel their emotions, you could see it on their face, and then when you coupled that with the video showing the events of the day and understanding that, you know, the people sitting in front of us were the same people who took the brunt of that physical attack, it was just very moving, and I think every member of the committee felt that emotion and the seriousness of why we were there.
As you well know, Speaker Pelosi did not allow two Republicans, Jim Jordan and Jim Banks, to be seated on that committee. Jordan, along with Minority Leader McCarthy, has said that the committee needs to investigate why the security situation was not ready for the potential threat. Will the committee look into that?
Certainly. The committee is going to cover a wide range of issues, and, you know, in addition to understanding what happened with an intelligence breakdown, the preparation for that day, why there were so few officers there, there's just a wide range of things that the committee will cover, and I certainly, you know, have the goal of the committee producing a report to make sure something like this doesn't happen again in the future, and that is part of it.
And if your investigation leads you in this direction, would you be willing to subpoena your colleague, Kevin McCarthy, who some have suggested is a material witness, or even former President Trump?
At this point, you know, like we've all said on the committee, we're going to go where the evidence leads us, and, you know, nothing is off the table. We are going to follow the evidence and the testimony and make sure that we hear from everyone who has played a part into the events of January 6th and the events leading up to January 6th.
And just to put a finer point on that, are you prepared to go to court to enforce subpoenas if individuals that you try to bring in for testimony aren't willing to comply?
Certainly. The work of this committee is incredibly important for the American people, for those officers whose testimony we heard today and the hundreds of others who we didn't hear from directly, to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. So we will use all the tools available to make sure that we can get that information necessary to understand what happened, why it happened, and how to stop something like this from ever happening again.
I want to play another snippet from the hearing from earlier. This is Capitol Police Sergeant Akilno Ganell talking about the dangers of members of Congress continuing to downplay what happened on that day.
What do you think people considering becoming law enforcement officers think when they see elected leaders downplaying this? You know, why would I risk my life for them when they don't even care? They don't care what happened to the public. They don't care what happened to the officers.
Based on that, are you worried at all about morale among Capitol Police who are charged with keeping all members of Congress safe?
I certainly think it's very challenging within the police force here on Capitol Hill, as well as the Metropolitan Police Department and all the others that responded that day. But the testimony today shows that they held the line. They literally held the line for this attack on the Capitol and truly for our democracy. So if there's anything I can say, you know, I think that they were heroic, and I want to thank them for that service. And I think that it is disgraceful that other of my colleagues are not taking the gravity of this situation and understanding, you know, how serious an affront to our democracy and our country that this event of January 6th truly was.
Are you optimistic at all that you'll have any chance of working with the Republican caucus at large on action items from this select committee once a final report is released?
I think that the goal of this is to produce something comprehensive, like the 9/11 Commission produced a report, and, you know, there was no partisanship in that. Everyone understood that there was a terrorist attack from outside our borders and from within that, you know, really put our country in danger, that killed many people. And I think that we need to look at this the same way. We need to take this with the utmost seriousness, and the things that we discover through this process, I can only be hopeful that everyone, regardless of political party, will act on those together to protect our country, our democracy, and to, you know, honor the sacrifice of these police officers who went through this horrific, horrific event.
Representative Luria, we thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you talking with us tonight. And now we are joined by Republican Congressman Pete Sessions of Texas. Congressman, we thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lindsay.
So in May, you voted against having an independent commission to investigate January 6th, arguing that there was a, quote, rushed desire for judgment and that time should be given for prosecution and trials before a public commission. As you know, many of your Republican colleagues didn't want an investigation to happen in 2022 during the midterm election year. So why isn't right now the best time for Congress to investigate what happened on January 6th?
Lindsay, I think it's important that we understand that if we really want to know the truth and find out what happened, We need to understand that there's a trial going on of a number of people who we will not know the answers to a lot of these questions for maybe a year. And my colleague spoke about the 9/11 Commission, which took a long period of time for the facts to become relevant and for us to determine what they were. There were a number of hearings that have been held. We have not heard of anyone that has been charged with sedition. We have not heard of anyone that had any weapons. We have not heard of anything where there was pre-planning. As a matter of fact, the members of the Capitol Hill Police and the FBI have said that by and large, they were taken by surprise. So what happened by surprise means that there needs to be an investigation, and we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to know, were there people who organized ahead of time? Who were these people and what were their communications? The Department of Justice has the largest ongoing investigation in their history. We need to let them do that and then share that information with this committee. We need to get it right. America needs to get this right. And that will take a period of time until some of those facts come out. Then we believe it's time to make sure that whatever we hear and do, we do with resolve of working together.
GOP Congressman Kinzinger said today that he's serving on the committee, quote, not to win a political fight, but to learn the facts and defend our democracy. Do you believe that there are benefits from public hearings and testimony from those who have direct knowledge of what happened on January 6th so that we better understand what happened and why? Is this something that Congress has an obligation to pursue?
I think we do have an obligation. I think it will be a one-sided affair. I think we will hear from members of law enforcement. We will hear from members who confronted this that day, and that is part of the process, and we do need that. But we also need to know what would be the investigatory part of this, and that is, what did we know ahead of time? Were they training together? Was there some camp in Ohio or West Virginia where these people knew each other ahead of time? They've been held now in solitary confinement, many of them, not able to speak with each other, not able to not get the story straight. And so the FBI, the Department of Justice, has had a lot of time, now 7 months, by which to gather the facts of the case, and that is what we need to hear. If the Speaker wants to tell us, or the head of the committee wants to tell us, oh, we've received that information, maybe that would be beneficial, but it's got to be used in a court of law, because actually this is more important, the part about the court of law. We need to hold these people accountable for their actions and either give them an opportunity to be in front of a jury with the facts of the case, and then that will tell us a lot more that we do not know today.
And you heard Congresswoman Luria there just a little bit ago say that the committee will investigate why there wasn't more security ready on January 6th. That would address one of your concerns. But given that this is moving forward as a hearing, even if it's something that you wanted or not, do you feel that Republicans are perhaps missing an opportunity by not being part of that conversation by serving on the Select Committee?
Well, now that's a political question that you ask, and the Speaker is the person that turned down the opportunity for our Republican leadership to provide the committee members that we would have. And that is very regrettable, and that I've never heard of this happening. And when the Speaker of the House decides who may be on the committee and selects two of hers from our ranks, which is her business, but it is not right to deny our opportunity for people who would be able to effectively not just understand what happened, but be able to argue the facts of the case. So, look, Republicans want to be a part of this. We want to ask and answer the questions. But what we don't want to rush into is, as the Speaker had in the bill that we voted against, where it had to be concluded by December 31st of this year, knowing that probably few trials would have occurred by then and the truth would not be known. The facts of the case are, we need to make sure that we understand what would happen if it happens tomorrow. What would be the response and the training necessary, and who will be held accountable for making those decisions? Today, it very likely that it was seen as the Speaker of the House that directed any outcome, any action that would be taken. And I think it should be placed within professional law enforcement. I think it should be well understood by a regular police officer who works for the Capitol Hill Police, and they should know what would happen if it happened tomorrow, because it's their job on the line and they need to know. And I think so do members, because it's our security and safety.
Of course. I'd like to play another clip, another comment from today's testimony from Capitol Police Sergeant Gunnell. Take a listen.
You downplaying an event that happened to the country itself, to democracy, to the rule of law. You're talking about people who claim that they are pro-law enforcement, pro-police, pro-law and order, and then yet when they have the chance and the opportunity to do something about it, to hold people accountable, you don't.
And what's your response to that, Congressman? Are Republicans who advocate for law and order not meeting that commitment by investigating an attack that had to be repelled by those brave law enforcement members?
I would say that the gentleman is entitled to his opinion, but an opinion that comes with facts needs to be the answer that we get, not an opinion that is of opinions. The facts need to be presented to this commission. They need to be presented to the public and to members. But we will not even know the facts. And by the way, we need to know that Mrs. Pelosi would be one of those witnesses that the Democrats are talking about. The Democrats want to talk about Congressman Kevin McCarthy being there. They want to talk about Donald Trump. But I believe Mrs. Pelosi has already indicated publicly she would not put herself in that position. And that should tell you that this is regrettable when we cannot really find out the real facts of how she responded to the activities before and after. One thing we do know is the person who is responsible for this, the committee chairwoman, who's responsible for House administration, did not come back to the Capitol for months before this attack took place. A person that had direct accountability and responsibility stayed in California for months before this took place, which tells you that they were asleep at the switch, in my opinion.
And lastly, Congressman, I just want to ask you about the Dallas Morning News reported that you deleted a tweet on January 7th that you had posted 3 days before the riot, where you wrote this: had a great meeting today with folks from Stop the Steal at our nation's capital. I encourage them to keep fighting and assured them I look forward to doing my duty on January 6th. Hashtag Stop the Steal, hashtag legal votes count. In hindsight, do you regret meeting with and publicly encouraging members of the group who went on to attack the Capitol on January 6th?
I believe that what happened before I was a member of Congress was I was sending a message at a very volatile time where people wanted to know whether I was going to be participatory in this that happened when sworn in as a member. And I do not regret that at all. But once it happened, the way it happened that no one knew about, I think it would be very inappropriate to keep it up. And I think any reasonable person would have done what I did. I think it was reasonable.
Reasonable to take it down?
Absolutely.
Congressman Pete Sessions, thank you so much for your time and insight.
You bet.
Now to the Tokyo Olympic Games and that dramatic moment today after American star Simone Biles pulled out of the team gymnastics competition. What was behind the move and what are her plans now going forward for the rest of the Summer Games? ABC's James Longman has the very latest.
Tonight, heartbreak and resilience at the women's team gymnastics. Heart stopping as star Olympian Simone Biles stumbled on the vault. Confusion as she's seen back in her tracksuit. And then the 24-year-old shocking the world, pulling out of the rest of the competition.
I didn't want to risk the team a medal for kind of my screw-ups because they've worked way too hard for that.
Her teammates, Sinisa Lee, Jordan Charles and Grace McCallum stepping up, Biles cheering them on from the sidelines. But in the end, it was a silver medal behind Russia's gold. Biles saying that she stepped aside to take care of her mental health.
I say put mental health first, so it's okay sometimes to even sit out the big competitions to focus on yourself.
Another shock, Japan's Naomi Osaka dealt a crushing blow. The tennis superstar, number 2 in the world, losing to Czech Republic's Markita Vondrousova, ranked 42nd. Osaka had dropped out of the French Open and Wimbledon to prioritise her mental health and prepare for the Olympics. Osaka telling reporters, "I definitely feel like there was a lot of pressure for this," adding, "I think it's maybe because I haven't played in the Olympics before." Outside the Olympic stadiums, COVID now at its highest level in Japan than at any point in the pandemic, with nearly 2,800 new cases.
It did feel that opposition to these games had waned a little bit here in Japan, but now we've just had massive COVID numbers reported.
Inside the Olympic bubble, there are now 160 positive cases, and the US now leading in overall medals. On day 4, the first ever gold in women's surfing going to Hawaii's Carissa Moore. And the Alaskan assassin, Lydia Jacoby, upsetting teammate Lily King in the 100-metre breaststroke. Jacoby, Alaska's first Olympic swimmer to earn gold, placing her small town of Seward on the map. Fans reacting all over her hometown.
So much excitement winning that gold. I imagine it does take a bit of time to process that. James Longman joins us now from Tokyo. Such a surprise, so devastating really for so many when Simone Biles withdrew from the team competition today. What do we know about her plans now going forward as far as the rest of these Olympic Games?
Well, Lindsay, she says she's going to take it a day at a time. They have a break now for training, so that will kind of work as a mental rest day. But I was struck by something she said in comments afterwards. She said, "You don't want to be taken out of here in a stretcher." And I think if you understand, if you watch these gymnastic competitions, you'll see that they're not just incredible to watch, they're actually really dangerous. And I think a lot of people overlook that. You know, when she's running for that vault, for instance, if she missteps, if she missed times, then she could break a leg or land on her head or her neck or worse. A lot of athletes actually don't attempt the kinds of things that Simone Biles does in competition because they are that dangerous. So I think when you're not there mentally, as she has said she wasn't really sort of in the right place, then you can really make errors which don't just cost your team a competition but can really, really injure you badly. Ali Raisman, you remember from the Olympic team 5 years ago now, she said that when you're up in the air and you're on a turn, if you're not in the right place, you actually don't know where you are in the air. So if you land wrong on your neck, then that can result in serious injury. So I think that's something that's being overlooked here. And actually, when we were in there, when we were watching this competition, the atmosphere was incredible. But that vault, Simone actually scored the lowest score on that particular rotation. So yes, this was a mental health decision, but it was also a sports decision. She did not want to keep rating low scores on the other apparatus and therefore bring the team's score down. And I have to say, those other women really did step up. Jordan Charles, who actually we watched her fall off the beam in qualification, she did an incredible job on that beam at the final. And you know, when you're not mentally prepared to go into those apparatus, when you haven't trained that morning, you know, they know when they're due to go onto each apparatus because in the morning they actually train in order. So when their anchor athlete comes out and they have to step up in their place, that took an enormous amount. I think we all can be inspired by what Simone Biles has done. She herself says that she was inspired by Naomi Osaka, who took time out from the tennis Grand Slams at Wimbledon and the French Open for her own mental health. And I think she's just raised an important question about mental health in sports. Lindsay?
And you're right, James, to point out sometimes we do forget about the stress and the danger involved. But we thank you so much for your reporting while you're over there. James, appreciate it. When we come back, the disturbing body camera, and now the officers facing charges for a violent arrest that their police chief called, quote, despicable. What we're learning about the investigation into the attack on former California Senator Barbara Boxer in Oakland. And as the Delta variant spreads inside the U.S., we travel to Indonesia, one of the world's most populated nations where few are vaccinated and where COVID is now raging out of control.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any place else. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast, now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show, ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live. This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
Squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
Welcome back. We turn overseas now to the spiraling COVID crisis in Indonesia as the Delta variant spreads. The country faces oxygen shortages and cases and hospitalizations escalate. This comes after the country had been spared the worst of the pandemic for much of the past year. The situation is now worsening in part because of low rates of vaccination in many Asian countries. ABC's Britt Clennett has a closer look in this week's Vaccine Watch.
As the Delta variant spreads around the world, parts of Asia that once had the virus under control are now some of the hardest hit. And in Indonesia's capital of Jakarta, excavators can't work fast enough, building plots to bury the dead that keep pouring in. Some patients forced to die at home. The hospitals are overrun and supplies are running low. With only about 6% of the population fully vaccinated, the Delta variant is tearing through the world's 4th most populous country. Indonesia now recording more than 40,000 cases each day, becoming Asia's COVID epicenter. On the streets, a clamour for oxygen. Defitio Pratamo, or Tio, is desperately searching for canisters. Speaking to our producer in Jakarta, he tells us his mother, who has asthma, was turned away from hospital after hospital. She still hasn't been vaccinated. They eventually found a hospital that would admit her. But like so many others in Indonesia, Tio, for weeks, had taken treatment into his own hands. Oxygen in the country is scarce and prices are rising.
Before, we could provide each customer up to 5 tanks of oxygen. Now we have to limit only 2 tanks per customer so that everyone can get it too.
For those on the front line, going to work carries huge risk. More than 100 healthcare workers in Indonesia have died since June, despite being fully vaccinated with China's Sinovac vaccine, which is less effective than the vaccines authorized in the US. Human Rights Watch researcher Andreas Harsono is among those who had the Chinese vaccine but tested positive for COVID. He says his symptoms are mild. His wife, though, hasn't been as lucky. She's had difficulty breathing.
She called stores that sell oxygen canister, zero. I decided to use Twitter asking for the public help. I was lucky. Someone who just bought an oxygen told me that, why don't you try there? And I managed to get one of the last 6 canisters there. I go to sleep with the sound of the siren outside my window every night. And every morning, 5 or 6 a.m., I wake up because of the same sound. My wife and I jointly lost more than 40 friends and relatives over the last 2 months.
Hospitals here are overwhelmed. Those lucky enough to get treatment often end up in outdoor COVID wards. Many countries in East and Southeast Asia were initially praised for their handling of the pandemic, but slow vaccination rates and a highly contagious variant is threatening any claims of successfully beating this virus. South Korea has a vaccination rate of only 12.9%, and they're in the midst of their worst ever outbreak. This small vaccination centre in Seoul is administering just 40 to 50 jabs a day, a far cry from the mass rollouts in the US. Some are taking it into their own hands, using an app to hunt for leftover vaccines.
I set an alarm on this mobile app, and when an alarm pops up, I can make a reservation. But as soon as I open the page after the alarm, it's already taken. I am never able to catch a slot.
Lengthy and strict lockdowns also having an adverse impact on business in South Korea, with no end in sight. This jewelry store owner tells us he had to close one store last month. His sales from his remaining store have fallen by half. 6 months into the global vaccination program, just about a quarter of the world's population has received a single dose.
That's why you've got massive outbreaks going on around the world. People don't seem to hear it. What they're hearing is possibly what they want to hear is, I'm vaccinated now, I can go back to normal. You can't. Not until you've sorted out the rest of the work.
But some help is on the way. The US is donating millions of doses of the Moderna vaccine to South Korea's military and Indonesian health workers. Those jabs into arms can't come fast enough. Already, more people have died from COVID this year than in 2020.
It's a critical moment where we are all under threat, but we have really in our hands the abilities to turn it around. But it requires those who've got the power, who've got the resources to share.
While part of the world is reopening, here in Asia, the borders remain firmly shut. Asian countries were among the most aggressive to close to outsiders to contain the virus. But now, with no clear pathway forward, there's growing frustration over when the region will fling open its doors again and make a transition to post-pandemic life. Lindsay?
Britt, thank you. Still ahead here on Prime, the man accused of killing 8 people at 3 Asian spas pleads guilty, as we're now learning more about what may have motivated him to commit those horrors. Do you really have to be young in order to be a great gymnast? Why conventional wisdom just might be wrong. And as a nation, how come we are less charitable than we used to be? We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. Between insurrections and the Delta variant, it has been another heavy news day. That's why we are grateful. The Dallas Zoo tweeted this.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Hug you. Yes. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show. The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
Welcome back, everyone. Now to a new study that finds that the share of Americans who give to charity has hit a new low. We take a look at why that might be by the numbers. According to the Indiana University Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, less than half, 49.6% of U.S. households made a charitable donation in 2018, the most recent year the data is available. That is a significant drop from the year 2000, when 66% of American households gave to charity. And the new data represents a roughly 20-year low. Charitable giving to religious causes saw the steadiest decline, falling from 46% to 29% over the past 2 decades. This coincides with plunging rates of church membership and other religious affiliations. Charity for secular causes has also dropped, but this trend mainly started after the Great Recession. 52% of Americans gave to secular causes in 2010, while only 42% did so in 2018. The study authors say that only 1/3, 33% of the overall decrease in charitable giving can be directly attributed to changes in income, wealth, and home ownership. But they said that some of the decline could be due to rising distrust among younger Americans for institutions and for each other, which has been borne out by other studies. And we still have lots to get to here on Prime tonight. The teen on vacation in Mexico when a crocodile attacks her, how she survived. And we're continuing to track those wildfires plaguing the West. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
World News Now.
And America This Morning.
The best new video.
The breaking news overnight.
Emergency crews called to the town of Surfside.
U.S. airstrikes hitting targets in Iraq and Syria.
The stories people are talking about.
If you don't want to shave your legs, don't. I was going to say.
Oh my. Got it.
And what to expect in the day ahead.
ABC World News Now and America This Morning.
Starting at 2 a.m. Eastern.
Up all night to keep you up to date.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source.
This is GMA3, what you need to know. GMA3.
A third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon.
It's all about you. Lunchtime on ABC.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're going to move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people
squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Today, powerful testimony of 4 officers who braved a deadly mob during the January 6 attack on the Capitol, recounting the horrors they endured in front of the House Select Committee.
One man tried and failed to build rapport with me, shouting, "Are you my brother?" Another takes a different tack, shouting, "You will die on your knees."
No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol police officer.
I sustained injuries on both my hands, my left shoulder, my left calf, and my right foot.
The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
For more than 3 hours, they testified and answered questions from the bipartisan group of lawmakers.
I was struck with a taser device at the base of my skull numerous times, and they continued to do so until I yelled out that I have kids.
Representative Adam Kinzinger, one of 2 Republicans serving on the committee, tearing up while listening.
You guys all talk about the effects you have to deal with, and, you talk about the impact of that day. But you guys won.
More than 80 large fires continue to burn in the West, most of them in California, Oregon, and Montana. The Dixie Fire destroying more than 208,000 acres in Northern California, more than 5,100 personnel trying to contain it. And if that's not enough, a widespread heat wave has blanketed across 18 states, from Montana to Georgia, the heat index reaching into the triple digits through tomorrow.
Former U.S. Senator Barbara Boxer is recovering from being attacked. Her office says the 80-year-old California Democrat was in Oakland when she was pushed in the back by an assailant who then stole her phone. The suspect then jumped into a waiting car. Oakland police are investigating and offering a $2,000 reward.
2 police officers are facing charges for this bloody and violent arrest in Aurora, Colorado. Officer John Haubert now charged with assault, accused of pistol whipping Kyle Vinson during the attempted arrest, choking him for 39 seconds, and threatening to kill him, according to the arrest warrant.
You move, I will shoot you.
Officer Francine Martinez is facing charges for not intervening. The police chief calling it a despicable act.
We're disgusted. We're angry. This is not police work. This was criminal.
A California teenager is recovering after a terrifying encounter with a 12-foot crocodile. Kiana Hummel was traveling with friends to Mexico when the trip turned into a nightmare. The 18-year-old was swimming outside the Marriott Hotel in Puerto Vallarta when she was attacked.
All of a sudden it came up and then I felt heaviness on my leg. And then I looked down and I feel like I'm getting pulled.
Its teeth digging into her right shin and then her left ankle.
And I was just kind of hitting him wherever I could.
In a statement, Marriott saying, "We can confirm that appropriate signage as well as night patrolling and red flags are properly in place." But Hummel says no one warned her about a possible crocodile attack. She says there was only a small warning sign, mostly in Spanish, that was not lit up at night.
Well, a one-of-a-kind Wu-Tang Clan album, once owned by the so-called farmer bro Martin Shkreli, was just sold by the government. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn announced the sale, but won't reveal how much the buyer paid. Shkreli bought the only recording of the album for $2 million back in 2015, but the court ordered him to hand it over in 2018 as part of his securities fraud conviction. The notorious hedge fund manager is serving a 7-year prison sentence. Shkreli became infamous for hiking the price of a life-saving HIV medication by more than 5,000%.
Welcome back, everyone. Robert Aaron Long, the man who killed 8 people at 3 spas in the Atlanta area, pled guilty today to murder and other charges related to those mass shootings and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. ABC's Elwin Lopez joins us now with more. Elwin, why did he take this plea deal?
Well, indeed, this plea deal spares his life, but he does face 4 additional murder charges here in Fulton County for the shootings that took place at this spa behind me and the one across the street. And the district attorney here has already said that she does plan to seek the death penalty, something that wasn't done in Cherokee County. Also, important to point out that nearly all of the victims were women of Asian descent. That being said, the Cherokee County DA did not pursue a hate crime against Long. She says that because of the evidence they saw, they didn't see any form of racism in his past behavior. But here in Fulton County, the district attorney says that she will seek a hate crime sentence enhancement. Lindsay.
And Elwin, you of course covered this shooting when it happened, spoke to so many families and residents in the area. Do you get the sense that the victims' families are feeling any semblance of closure today?
Well, not really closure, but I can tell you that the husband of Emily Tam, Michael Webb, says that he does feel very satisfied with the plea deal. But that being said, the Asian American community here, Lindsay, is still suffering, and it's going to take time for that healing, Lindsay.
Understandably so. Elwin Lopez, our thanks to you. And that is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Coming up the next hour, we're staying on top of several things, including day 1 of that select House committee probe into the disgrace that was January 6th. And our exclusive sit-down with actress Mina Suvari, who is opening up about the struggles she endured during the height of her career.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
I can tell you that I'm not a person who wants to die. I'm not the strongest every day, but I'm not the weakest either. And I won't break.
Whitney Houston, she had the ingredients.
Just pow. She was the queen. A crown was given to her, and crowns are heavy.
You think it's easy being a superstar? You have no idea.
Superstar Whitney Houston. Wednesday night, August 11th on ABC and streaming on Hulu.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Hey everyone, I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. We're monitoring several developments here at ABC News at this hour. Simone Biles cited the toll of the past year as the reason that she had to pull out of the team gymnastics competition. She said that she stepped aside to take care of her mental health, adding that she didn't want to be the reason that the team did not get a medal. The U.S. team won silver. The Russians won gold. Tonight, authorities in Maryland have arrested a man for sending threats to Dr. Fauci and his family. The suspect is accused of sending some very graphic and disturbing emails from an encrypted account for the last 8 months, even allegedly sent some to Fauci's wife and daughters. Dr. Fauci has been receiving security protection since March of 2020 due to the threats against him. The tributes are coming in for former Wyoming Republican Senator Mike Enzi, who died following a bike accident. The senator passed away surrounded by family. He had sustained serious injuries while riding near his home. He was 77 years old. And now to the gut-wrenching testimony before Congress today. The roughly 3-hour hearing was the first from the Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The 2 Republicans on the committee challenging their own party. Rachel Scott covering it all for us from the Capitol.
Do you swear?
Tonight, 4 uniformed police officers, in their own words, testifying before Congress, telling Americans what they went through on January 6th.
I remember thinking there was a very good chance I would be torn apart or shot to death with my own weapon.
Their harrowing account came with new and raw video. The violent mob of Trump supporters surging into the Capitol. This officer refusing to give ground, even as one man punches the glass behind him. Sergeant Aquilino Ganell, who also served in Iraq, first to testify.
On January 6th, for the first time, I was more afraid to work at the Capitol than my entire deployment to Iraq.
Sergeant Ganell said he thought he was going to die. Crushed by the mob, sprayed by chemicals.
I arrived home at nearly 4 a.m. on January 7th. I had to push my wife away from me because she wanted to hug me. And I told her no, because of all the chemical that my uniform had on. Sorry.
Then Officer Michael Fanone.
I was dragged from the line of officers and into the crowd. I heard someone scream, "I got one." As I was swarmed by a violent mob, they ripped off my badge. They grabbed and stripped me of my radio. They seized ammunition that was secured to my body. They began to beat me with their fists and with what felt like hard metal objects. I heard chanting from some in the crowd, "Get his gun," and kill him with his own gun. I thought of my 4 daughters who might lose their dad. I said as loud as I could manage, I've got kids.
His body camera capturing that moment.
What makes the struggle harder and more painful is to know so many of my fellow citizens, including so many of the people I put my life at risk to defend, are downplaying or outright denying what happened. The indifference shown to my colleagues is disgraceful.
Officer Daniel Hodges.
There were a significant number of men dressed in tactical gear attending the gathering, wearing ballistic vests, helmets, goggles, military face masks.
What happened to Officer Hodges in the Capitol recorded on video for the world to see. And even today, clearly painful for him to watch. Crushed in a doorway by men he calls terrorists.
Directly in front of me, a man seized the opportunity of my vulnerability, grabbed the front of my gas mask, and used it to beat my head against the door. He switched to pulling it off my head, the strap stretching against my skull and straining my neck.
Finally, Officer Harry Dunn, a 13-year veteran of the Capitol Police, describing a face-off with the racist mob.
I told them to just leave the Capitol, and in response they yelled, "No, man, this is our house. President Trump invited us here. We're here to stop the steal. Joe Biden is not the president. Nobody voted for Joe Biden. I'm a law enforcement officer, and I do my best to keep politics out of my job. But in this circumstance, I responded, well, I voted for Joe Biden. Does my vote not count? Am I nobody?" That prompted a torrent of racial epithets. One woman in a pink MAGA shirt yelled, "You hear that, guys? This voted for Joe Biden." Then the crowd, perhaps around 20 people, joined in screaming, "Boo!" No one had ever called me a while wearing the uniform of a Capitol Police officer.
Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney then asking about former President Donald Trump's words revealed in recent days, how he describes the crowd on January 6th.
You hear former President Trump say, quote, "It was a loving crowd. There was a lot of love in the crowd." How does that make you feel?
It's upsetting. It's a pathetic excuse for his behavior, for something that he himself helped to create, this monstrosity.
Our thanks to Rachel Scott for that. And for more on today's Select Committee hearing, let's bring in ABC News Political Director Rick Klein. Rick, as you know, the Select Committee has faced questions over its membership after the GOP withdrew its slate. Even with 2 GOP members appointed by Speaker Pelosi, do you feel like this committee can be effective investigating January 6th, or is it all too clouded by politics at this point?
I don't think the two questions are mutually exclusive, Lindsay. I think it can be an effective committee, and I think the initial days showed exactly why. By putting people on the record, by having public testimony, by potentially wielding a subpoena power down the road, they can get to things that no other public entity has done, and we're not going to have a big bipartisan commission. And in terms of the politicization, you heard it from some of the witnesses today, those law enforcement officials who were literally under attack. This entire event was political. And so taking politics out of it, I don't think is a realistic goal. And I think to hear the members talk about it today, the important thing is to try to do it in as honest and open a way as possible. That doesn't mean you're going to have full Republican participation, but that's the price of doing business at this stage, because if you want to answer the questions that Democrats and at least a few Republicans want answered, it's going to mean going it alone. And I think this committee is off to a strong start in doing that.
And Republicans, of course, did reject the independent bipartisan commission format that would have given them equal voices in hearings. And the 2 GOP members, Adam Kinzinger and Liz Cheney, both spent time today questioning, really pushing back on GOP talking points from January 6th. So are Republicans losing something by not participating?
It was striking to not have the voice of Trump loyalists in the opening day of these hearings. We've become used to, whether it's impeachment or any other areas of congressional oversight, certain members of the former president's party engaging in procedural antics, complaints, and generally just leveling critiques at Democrats for engaging in what they view as a witch hunt. I think by choosing not to participate, McCarthy, of course, didn't have his choices all accepted by Pelosi. He decided to pull everyone. They lost an opportunity to at least try to push back. That said, I think a lot of people would have liked to see Republicans try to push these members of the law enforcement community, people that were there themselves as witnesses, and try to impugn their credibility. I think that there was something missing from that, but I do think that for this initial day, Republicans, by being silent, did give up an opportunity to try to make a case. Maybe it's a case they didn't feel like they could have made or should have made in this forum, but it was certainly missing from this day.
And really, to that point, we've also, of course, heard Republicans now pushing that this committee needs to investigate why the security situation wasn't prepared for January 6th and that Speaker Pelosi is to blame for that. Do you think that that's at all an effective argument?
Well, they're certainly going to push it, and I think the committee is going to have to look at least parts of this. I don't see them calling Nancy Pelosi. I think Republicans are vastly overstating any culpability, any responsibility that Pelosi would have had for the Capitol complex. Lots of congressional leaders are involved in securing it, and certainly the root causes of this are far afield from the lack of engagement with the warning signs. But that's what the Republican talking point has been. They're pushing it, they're stating it, and I think overstating the facts so far. But I consider it at this point mostly a political smokescreen to make it about Pelosi and about the questions that this committee isn't answering, rather than the questions that it's trying to get answers to.
And we did hear some compelling testimony from those Capitol Hill police officers today. What do you think can be accomplished by this committee as far as potentially revealing new information about January 6th, and who else could we see as a potential witness?
Yeah, I think day one was the baseline, just establishing the facts, reminding people, even if they knew the bare bones of it or if they'd seen a lot of the video, how fraught, how scary it was in the moment. I was struck and riveted by the testimony and the video as well, reliving that day from 6 months ago, that horrible day. The key question now is what documents, what evidence, what information this committee is able to compile, whether that's phone records or other communications records between officials and aides. And critically, I think the testimony of former White House officials under President Trump, and even members of Congress up to including Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy, people that have said they spoke to President Trump on that day. That, to me, is going to fill in a lot of the timeline and a lot of the blanks that we have in understanding of that horrific day.
Rick Klein, thanks so much.
Thank you, Lindsay.
To the coronavirus now, and the CDC's announcement that all Americans should wear masks once again indoors, regardless of vaccination status in areas with high COVID-19 transmission rates. The federal agency also recommending universal masking in schools. This after suggesting for months that vaccinated people were safe to go maskless. ABC's Eva Pilgrim has more.
Tonight, with new evidence, fully vaccinated people with so-called breakthrough cases can potentially spread the Delta variant, the CDC reversing mask guidance for schools and millions of vaccinated Americans.
In rare occasions, some vaccinated people infected with the Delta variant after vaccination may be contagious and spread the virus to others. This new science is worrisome.
That spread from vaccinated people not believed to be a serious risk with earlier strains, which is one reason the CDC is now urging Americans to wear masks indoors if they are in an area with substantial or high transmission. Not only to protect yourself, but to protect others, now that the CDC has this new data indicating that even vaccinated people can transmit the virus in some cases. The CDC also reversing its guidance from 2 weeks ago, now recommending universal masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors, regardless of vaccination status. The CDC stressing the vast majority of transmission occurs among unvaccinated people, but they are studying clusters of breakthrough infections.
When we examine the rarer breakthrough infections and we look at the amount of virus in those people, it is pretty similar to the amount of virus in unvaccinated people.
Late today, President Biden saying a requirement for federal employees to get a vaccine is under consideration.
We have a pandemic because of the unvaccinated. There's so much enormous confusion. The more we learn about this virus and the development severity, the more we have to be worried. one thing we know for sure. If those other 100 million people got vaccinated, we'd be in a very different world. Get vaccinated. If you haven't, you're not really as smart as I said you were.
The president also saying in a statement, we are not going back to last year. More vaccinations and mask wearing in the areas most impacted by the Delta variant will enable us to avoid the kind of lockdowns, shutdowns, school closures, and disruptions we faced in 2020. Unlike 2020, we have both the scientific knowledge and the tools to prevent the spread of this disease. We are not going back to that. Today's new mask guidance coming as parents across the country are protesting mask mandates in schools.
I cannot stand to see her masked, and she doesn't want to be masked.
7 states have banned mask mandates in schools, including Arizona, where students are already back in the classroom. Masks optional. And with the Delta surge, a warning from the former head of the CDC, Dr. Tom Frieden, that COVID cases could soar.
We're heading into a rough time. It's likely, if our trajectory is similar to that in the United Kingdom, that we could see as many as 200,000 cases a day.
In Houston, doctors are seeing a repeat of moments like this from last summer's surge.
In the last 14 days, we've had a 500% increase in the number of admissions.
And in Florida, hospitals overwhelmed. Some doctors pleading for extra staffing. In Fort Lauderdale, the family of 15-year-old Paulina Velasquez says she was planning to get the vaccine when she got COVID. She's now fighting for her life on a ventilator. Paulina's vaccinated mother is experiencing a breakthrough COVID infection herself, not leaving her daughter's side.
It was terrifying for me because I said, why me? Why not, why my daughter? Why not me? It was very sad.
Sad and scary. Our thanks to Eva for that. Now to an ABC News exclusive with Mina Savari. The actress has a new memoir out called The Great Peace, all about her behind-the-scenes struggles with substances and abuses at the peak of her fame. Our Juju Chang sat down with her.
Mina Savari, one of the most famous Hollywood faces of her generation. Yet she says she was hiding in plain sight.
You describe in your memoir as living a double life.
Do you mean at the time when like American Pie and American Beauty came out?
Yeah.
I was just like catapulted
into fame.
Heather, I'm sorry. I totally blew it.
It's okay. You should do what makes you happy. I didn't even really know what fame was. It wasn't something that I had ever wanted for myself.
Tell me about American Pie. And how much the character sort of resonated in your life.
Oh, well, it was sweet for me because I remember they asked me when I was leaving the audition, oh, by the way, do you sing?
Needed the shelter of someone's arms. There you were.
The year was 1999. Savari starring in 2 blockbusters, American Pie and American Beauty, which garnered 5 Academy Awards, thrusting a then 20-year-old Savari into the spotlight. But underneath all those rose petals, Savari was suffering in silence, in an abusive relationship, living in utter despair.
I was just sitting there. I had all my stuff on the floor. I was like living on the floor, like squalor. And then I'm like going to this mega $1 million set and people are sprinkling rose petals on me. My friend Tracy, and she said, it doesn't have to be like this. And that's why I talk about that moment, because it struck me so deeply. I think I knew it. And I had to perform because then at the same time, everybody wanted that from me because it was successful.
Her memoir, The Great Peace, begins with her finding her old suicide note and then chronicles her stories of sexual abuse that began at age 12.
It still affects me. A part of me died that day for sure. You're never the same. And then you live with the constant questioning of whether or not that really happened and whether or not you're entitled to consider it as such.
I've spoken to so many sexual assault survivors who say it happened at 12, and then I kept finding myself in vulnerable situations and sexually taken advantage of.
Because you just feel alone. You don't think that those things are happening. I mean, who are you going to talk to about that?
Attempts to numb her pain, leading Savari to experiment with all sorts of drugs, including meth.
You lose your mind on meth. You're in a completely different zone. And it was labeled as the worst thing in the world, but it will make you feel like you can do absolutely anything.
That sounds like the devil's invitation.
And I just thought, okay, you know, I had like nothing to lose, I felt.
Today, Suvari's world is filled with happiness and hope. Michael Hope, her husband and father to their baby boy born this April.
Just miraculous. I never thought that something so beautiful would happen for me, for us, something that I'd always hoped for.
Her story, she hopes, will help others live their most authentic lives.
I've always sort of said if I could shave off a summer of suffering for someone, that I wanted to do that because I felt like I didn't have that person in my life.
You kept those secrets so bottled up, and now you're literally releasing them into the world. What does that feel like?
Liberating, yeah. I like living my life in an authentic way that feels good to me, that works for me.
How would you describe yourself today?
Oh, wow. God, kaleidoscopic, a work in progress.
So true of so many of us. Our thanks to Juju for that. And still to come, the unbelievable devastation in parts of northern Italy from the latest bout of extreme weather.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. Good Morning America, #1 in the morning, 9 years running. World News Tonight with David Muir, #1 in the evening with America's most watched newscast. 2020, the #1 news magazine on Friday nights. The View, the #1 daytime talk show. And ABC News Live, #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
Now streaming on ABC News Live 2020. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt. True crime 2020. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
Seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know,
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it? Feel smarter.
feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Now streaming on ABC News Live.
It's all about you.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
Yeah. So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 12 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
This is what being live is all about. This is ABC News Live.
All right, we're gonna move back. Let's move back.
We're surrounded by people squeezing into this bomb shelter.
We're on an urgent delivery run with.
Not afraid to go there.
So my question, Mr. President, what are you so afraid of?
Breaking news, live events.
This is the moment.
Streaming straight to you, anytime, anywhere.
You just met one friend right here.
You're watching ABC News Live. Thanks for streaming with us. Welcome back. We're tracking several international headlines at this hour. A cleanup effort is now underway in northern Italy after torrential downpours caused extreme flooding and massive landslides. Towns surrounding Italy's Lake Como hit especially hard. The storm so powerful, streets were left overflowing with debris and cars flipped upside down. The landslide burying some houses up to their roof. At this time, no deaths or injuries have been reported. The first person tried under Hong Kong's sweeping new national security law was found guilty today. The man was arrested last July after driving a motorcycle into police officers while holding a banner that read "Liberate Hong Kong." He was charged with inciting separatism and terrorism. Since the law was implemented last year, more than 100 pro-democracy supporters have been arrested. Melbourne, Australia has lifted its 5th COVID-19 lockdown. The country's second most populous city, announcing it beat an outbreak of the Delta variant for a second time. This is only 16% of adults in the country are now fully vaccinated. Sydney, the country's most populous city and where the outbreak began, remains in lockdown indefinitely. Now to a closer look at one big difference about the world-class gymnasts in these Olympics. It's a story that we first saw on 538, and Amy Robach has more from Tokyo.
While all eyes are usually on superstar Simone Biles when she's on the floor, this gymnast from Uzbekistan briefly stole the show in Tokyo. 46-year-old Oksana Chusovitina competing in her 8th and final Olympics. In fact, female gymnasts at these Olympics are in general older than in many previous games. According to 538, the average age of female gymnasts competing in Tokyo is just under 22. The Americans are no exception.
The first time in decades, the American women's gymnastics team have all been adults. They're all at least 18 years old.
But if you think this senior wave of top-flight gymnasts is something new, well, think again. Gymnastics used to look like this. The average age for female gymnasts at the 1952 Olympics was almost 28, but it all changed in the 70s. First, 17-year-old Olga Korbut, and then 14-year-old Nadia Comaneci becoming overnight stars at the Olympics.
Gymnastics used to be very concentrated on dance and was done by older, adult women. And then there were these teenage phenoms in the 1970s.
Gymnasts were starting the sport younger and younger until it became the norm. But some experts say starting at 5 instead of 11 isn't necessarily better.
There's many other really high-level studies that are looking at when the best ages for peak strength, peak power, peak cardio fitness that you need for gymnastics, and it's definitely not when you're 13.
All-time great Simone Biles is still scaling new heights at the ripe old age of 24. Now many in the sport, like 2008 Olympian Chelsea Memel, a mother of 2 who at 32 competed at this year's U.S. Nationals, are hoping these Olympics will be a gymnastics game changer.
It was always like, if you don't peak when you're 16, that's it. And it was like ingrained in our culture of gymnastics. I think people are trying to train a little bit differently, train a little bit smarter, listen to their bodies better. And that would be really cool to see a little bit more longevity in this sport.
Our thanks to Amy for that. And back now with the queen of country, Miss Dolly Parton. We all know that she works a lot more than 9 to 5. ABC's Will Reeves sat down with Dolly in her home state of Tennessee to talk about all the exciting projects she has coming up.
Working 9 to 5, what a way to make a living.
For decades, Dolly Parton has been making a living by turning her dreams into reality.
Jolene, Jolene.
Through her music and at Dollywood.
I understand that your title here is Dreamer in Chief.
I am the Dreamer in Chief. I have been fortunate in my life to see so many dreams come true, and Dollywood was always one of my biggies in my early years. We are opening a new resort that's going to open in 2023, and it's called Heart Song Resort and Lodge.
You have a hand in so many things, and now you're breaking into the world of perfume. I have Scent from Above right here. What am I holding in my hands? Can you explain
Well, this is
to me?
Dolly, Scent from Above, and I named it that because it smells heavenly. One of the reasons that I developed it, because people always follow me around asking me what I'm wearing. And so I got with the fragrance people, and we worked on it for months and months and months, actually a few years. And so everybody says it smells like me, and that's good.
The perfume launching on the Home Shopping Network tomorrow.
They say that smell is the sense most tied to memory and emotion. Does that come into play here at all?
Well, I know that it does. I know that that is true. I think music and scents like that, if I'll open a drawer and find an old bottle of perfume or something, it'll remind me of everything that I was going through at that time. I tried to make a good combination of my memories and my life and my love for perfume.
I think a whole lot of people will spray this on and think of you. So
I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope they think of me every time, and that it's sent from above.
For Dolly, who's devoted her career to helping others, it all goes back to a higher power.
I wonder what message you might have for people who look up to you.
Well, I just want people to be their better self. So whether you're religious or faith people or not, just try to draw on that higher wisdom and just be a better person. Try to make things a little better. So I just like to kind of bring a little sunshine if I can.
Be better. Our thanks to Dolly Parton and Will Reeve for that. And before we go tonight, our image of the day. Love at first FaceTime. Well, we don't know that the two actually endangered Galapagos tortoises did go on a date in Australia. Hugo, 70 years old, we heard that he's ready to settle down. His mate Estrella was supposed to travel from Germany last year, but COVID ruined those plans. She just arrived, but is now in quarantine until September. We're told the chemistry from the virtual date was, quote, off the charts. How they actually know that, unclear, but it's fun to believe that they may have hit it off. Though, in true tortoise fashion, they'll likely take things slow. That is our show for tonight. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts.